It is only Jesus Christ's blood, His life, that is an acceptable currency, that is valuable enough to have purchased the land back. He has purchased the ability for us to be right with God, to live in a space with Him.
Welcome to the Reach College Podcast with your speaker, Pastor Taylor Gabbert.
How many of you are runners? 1, 2, okay. I've done a lot of running, and one of the things that I have done that I did not enjoy was unknown distance running. Has anyone ever done that? You run, but they don't tell you how long the course is. That's a special kind of painful. It takes out like some of the hope factor of like you're like, this is never gonna end. So it can be rough, especially if they do it well. It's not just like running in a circle, not knowing how many laps you have to do. It's like a course, and you don't even know where you are. You're taking lefts and rights, going through sand, up hills, and you're just thinking the whole time like, when will this end? And it's really hard to keep kind of your pace, because you don't even know, should I be going slower because I'm going to have to go further, right? Am I running too fast? And there's this level at which it's really hard to keep your brain set on your goal, because you don't know what your goal is, right? That can be the Christian life a lot of times. The Christian life is like running a race. We're told that. But sometimes it feels like running a race with an unknown distance, because you're like, okay, is Jesus going to come back tomorrow? Am I going to live to be 103? Like, I don't know how this is going to go. How long do I kind of have to keep this up and run this race? And we've been in the March of Redemption, and we've been beginning to wind down the portion of Abraham's life. Well, the thing is, Abraham today, he is in this chapter 137 years old. I can't help but feel like he really was wondering how long his race was going to go. And he's probably needs some rest. Right now, we're told that the Christian life is supposed to be a life of rest. We're supposed to rest in Christ. We're supposed to rest in the way that we walk through this life. But at the same time, 137 is, I hope I don't live that long. I mean, that's a long time, right? And so you got to imagine that Abraham is really starting to wonder and feel that endurance, that drain on him, and wonder when that rest is going to set in. And as he's nearing this portion of his life, we're going to be in chapter 23 today, and this is when Sarah is going to pass away. So she's going to die at 127 years old, right? And so not only now is Abraham just really old, but he's also having to endure the loss of his wife that he's been with for decades. And he is, the thing is, what we just saw from Abraham in chapter 22 was really kind of the first time that he passes the test. It's like the first time after all the sanctification in his life, all the training that God has done with him, that he really gets to a place where he actually endures a trial and trusts the Lord and has faith. Well, it would be so much of a shame, right, if right after that he just is like, well, I made it, and just gives up, just like, well, God knows that I'm faithful, so now I don't have to do anything else. But instead, what we see is an example of his continued endurance. Of Abraham, he's going to continue to be the man that God has called him to be. He's going to continue to trust in the Lord, actually even better in his old age than he did as a young man. Or, young, like when he was 90. But so Abraham is 137 years old, and yet he's not going to let up. And we're going to see that he is trusting in the promise of God. The promise of God that he's been given is the land, right? That he's going to receive the land, that God is going to give him and his ancestors the land. And now I want to recall, if you've been here through the whole March of Redemption, you'll recall this. If not, go back and listen to the creation account. The theme of the land is one of the first things in the entire book of Genesis. What we see is that God intentionally prepared a place, a land, where he could live with us. That was the goal. He wanted a spot where he could share life with us. Well, we lost that in Genesis chapter 3, and ever since then, God has basically been promising, I'm going to make that right. I'm going to regain the land. I'm going to give it to you. There's going to still be a place where you can be with me and we can be together in the land. And that's a theme that runs through Genesis. So look at Genesis chapter 23, starting in verse 1. Now Sarah lived 127 years. These were the years of the life of Sarah. Sarah died in Kiriath Arba, that is Hebron, in the land of Canaan, and Abraham came in to mourn for Sarah and to weep for her. Then Abraham arose from mourning before his dead and spoke to the sons of Heth, saying, I am a stranger and a foreign resident among you. Give me a burial site among you so that I may bury my dead out of my sight. Okay, so Isaac at this point is 37 years old. So that's a weird jump in our brain because we kind of go from he's a baby to he's like a toddler when Ishmael gets kicked out to he's a teenager when he's taken up onto Mount Moriah, and we move from like he's like 15 or 16 to he's 37, right? So we skip a huge portion of Isaac's life. Now, what I want you to see is that even though Sarah and Abram had to wait so long to have Isaac, they got to share life with him. They got to raise him. He got to grow up with his parents. And so that blessing wasn't something that was like shortchanged by God. He wasn't like, well, here's the kid I offered you, but it's kind of too late in the game, so you're dead now. Like, he actually lets them enjoy the blessing that they've been given. So Sarah finally passes away, and Abraham is mourning her. Now, what I want you to see is there's going to be, what we're going to move into this entire chapter really is Abraham is conducting business with the local residents of the land, with the sons of Heth or the Hittites, okay? Now, he's going to conduct business with them, and it's not going to look the way that it looks to us when we think about conducting business. And so that's why we need to know that that's what's happening, because the language, if you're just having your normal reading through the Bible and you just read chapter 23, you're not going to see this as like a very well-regulated negotiation, but that's exactly what's happening. Now, one thing I wanted to bring up, when I was in Greece this spring, and we went to go see what is the tomb of Philip, Alexander the Great's father, the king of Macedonia, right? So Philip conquered Greece, and then Alexander, when he took over, he maintained the unity of Greece, and then he ends up conquering most of the known world at that time, right? And Alexander is this great Greek hero. Okay. Now the thing is, when you go to Greece, they love Alexander the Great. I mean, that is their favorite ancestor, and they make a big deal out of the fact that Alexander the Great was one of their fathers. Here's the only problem: Alexander the Great wasn't Greek. Neither was Philip. They were Macedonian, right? They were Macedonians that came in and conquered Greece, and so it's weird that they then adopt him as a father, because you look at the fact of what happened, and he was an outsider. Well, the tour guide answered that question because we were walking through their the tombs that they've uncovered. That is definitely Philip. They don't know where Alexander the Great is buried, but they have Philip's tomb, and they might have Philip's wife's tomb. And we're walking through the area that they've excavated, and they have these tombs. And I remember the tour guide saying, here's the thing about Alexander. Alexander learned under Aristotle, a Greek philosopher. He spoke Greek. He wore Greek clothes. He had Greek customs. And he said, and if you really want to know why we consider him Greek, even though he technically wasn't, if you really want to know why we said that's a Greek man, it's because when his parents died, he buried them according to Greek customs. See, here's the thing. You can call Alexander whatever you want because he was born in whatever place, but the real question is, who was he? How did he act in his life? And one of the most intimate things he ever did was to bury his father and mother according to Greek customs. So the Greeks are the ones who point to that, and they go, you can call him a Macedonian all day, but that's a Greek man. What I want you to see here is that Abraham is going to do something that's abnormal. See, what should have happened, he's a traveler, a sojourner, he's a tent dweller, right? He's roaming across the land. He's not a resident. He calls himself a foreigner and a stranger. And yet, when Sarah dies, what was expected of him is that he would take her and he would journey all the way back to the land of his relatives, his home, where his family owns land and had burial sites, and he would bury Sarah among his ancestors, his people. That's what was expected of him. But he doesn't. See, instead, he's going to go through an entire process to attain land that he doesn't have any connection to other than God's promise to him that it is actually rightfully his, because God's going to give it to him. And he's going to attain this land, and he's going to bury Sarah in the land that he's been promised instead of taking her home. See, in this moment, Abraham's whole life we're seeing put to the test in that instead of saying, I know God's promised me this land and he's been pretty faithful, but really my home is back over here with my relatives. He says, no, I'm standing on my home. I know I only have tents. I know I don't have any land rights. I know that I don't own any of this ground, but yet this is where God has told me that he's going to be with me and be with my relatives. And if this is my home, this is where I'm going to bury my wife. So he's going to make this decision to bury her in the land that he believes God has given him. So he's a resident alien, but he believes God. Look at verse 5. The sons of Heth answered Abraham, saying to him, Hear us, my lord. You are a mighty prince among us. Bury your dead in the choicest of our graves. None of us will refuse you his grave for burying your dead. So Abraham stood up and bowed to the people of the land, the sons of Heth. Okay. So first of all, I want you to see this. Abraham has lived in this land a long time. He's always been a sojourner. He would have always been in this area a second-class citizen. Always. Right? He's not a landowner. He doesn't have any rights. He is a foreigner that he's essentially having to live off the good graces of his host nation. And yet, when he finally needs something from them, when he asks them for something, they acknowledge his status before them because of the way that Abraham has lived his life, because of the way that he has honored God, the way that God has blessed him. He is viewed with high esteem in the area that surrounds him. They call him a mighty prince. They say, listen, we know you. You have a great reputation. You're someone who's blessed by God. We are more than willing to help you out. And I want you to see something else here, though. They offer him a gift. They say, well, pick a grave, pick a tomb. We'll give it to you. It'll be yours. But I want you to see that this is not as genuine as it may appear. Now, it would have been the dictate of a shame culture that they would have thought, well, we need to give this man something because he's going through mourning. It would be rude not to. That's definitely a part of this process. There is a little bit of like, well, he's mourning the death of his wife, so yeah, of course we'll give him something. Of course we'll share this tomb. But the other piece of this is that a gift means that Abraham is now going to be in their debt. See, there's no version of them giving him this for free where they also sign the deed over and say, well, now it's yours forever. The gift would have made him still a visitor, even in the burial site. As a matter of fact, there's some evidence to say that they could have come back however many generations later and said, hey, get your debt out of here. Like, we let you borrow this tomb for some time, but we not anymore. We're taking it back. Because it was never really his. So offering the gift, even though it does have a little bit of social implication about, well, he's mourning the loss of his wife, it really is self-serving because it's a way that they don't have to actually give him any land. They can merely just lend it to him in a way that he actually still owes them, right? This is not the way that God intends for Israel to get the land, right? And I want you to see this. The land is not even theirs to give, right? They're standing on it. They have the deeds to it, but God's the one who owns the land. God is the one who has given them the land for this time period. And so they're offering something that, even though they have a temporal way to give it to Abraham, they don't have an eternal way to give it to Abraham. And Abraham is not satisfied because he knows that God has given him the land in an eternal way, that it's his to rest in. See, the world wants to offer you rest in its way, but it doesn't actually have any rest to give you. The thing is, if you take what the world offers, it never proves to be restful. It always proves to exhaust you, to drain you even more, to steal life from you. And, worst of all, it puts you in the debt of the world. See, the world wants you to owe it, for you to have skin in the game, so they can say, well, look at all this we've given you. Look at all that you have. See, one of the temptations with Jesus is Satan comes before him and he says, look at all of this. I'll give it to you. It's not his to give. And he wants to give it to him so that he's the one that's owed. He says, just worship me. Just worship me and I'll make all of this yours. See, that's the exact same thing that's happening right now. Abraham's being offered something from people who don't have it to give, not in a real way, not in an eternal way, and it's going to put him in debt. He has to keep his eyes on true rest. You have to continue to look at eternal things. How does currency work? Currency works because we agree on its value, right? This is why you probably can't go to the mall with like chickens and goats and be like, I want that t-shirt. How many goats will it be? Right? And even though like goats have some value, right? That's not an agreed upon currency. It's not a currency that's acceptable to the people that you are offering it to. You have to have the appropriate currency to pay for what you owe. Look at verse 7. So Abraham stood up and bowed to the people of the land, the sons of Heth, and he spoke with them, saying, if you are willing to let me bury my dead out of my sight, listen to me and plead with Ephron, the son of Zohar, for me, that he may give me the cave of Machpelah, which he owns, which is at the end of his field. For the full price, let him give it to me, in your presence for the burial site. Now Ephron was sitting among the sons of Heth, and Ephron the Hittite answered Abraham, so that the sons of Heth heard. That is, all who entered the gate of the city, saying, no, my lord, listen to me. I give you the field, and I give you the cave that is in it. In the presence of the sons of my people, I give it to you. Bury your dead. Okay. So, first of all, I want you to see that there is a scene change here. This is not one conversation that occurs. It's as though Abraham, after the time of mourning, after he spends the appropriate time grieving in a acceptable cultural way, he's going to go before the Hittites, the rulers of the land, and say, I'm asking for a burial site. And they, as the rulers, they're saying, you pick one, nobody will refuse you. And then there's a transition to the gates of another city where Ephron is, to ask Ephron to give his field with his cave in it to Abraham. That's the one that he's picking. Now, again, there is a shame culture. It's a little bit different how they interact with each other in a shame culture. So part of what's happening here is Ephron, he's sitting at the city gate. That implies some amount of stature. He's a well-known person. He's a landowner. And he's also before the witnesses of the land, not just before the people in his city and the other people of status in his city, but also probably the rulers, the people that are with Abraham. They've probably drawn a crowd because, again, Abraham's a foreigner, so this is somewhat of a spectacle, some kind of land deal going on. Again, land is a sensitive thing. Land has inheritance implications. It has certain values, cultural and familial. So Abraham asking for land is a big deal. Well, because of the shame culture interaction, Ephron is obligated to not refuse Abraham. But he does the exact same thing that we've already seen. He says, absolutely, I will give you this cave. This cave will be yours. You can put your wife in it, right? But again, that offer is of the best benefit to Ephron, right? It's not disingenuous. He really is going to give it to him. He respects Abraham. He wants Abraham to have a place to put his wife, but he also doesn't want to lose his land. He doesn't want his land to become Abraham's land. He's saying, yeah, sure, you can absolutely, I'll take you in. In a sense, there's almost even a threat to erase Abraham's lineage, because if they just start borrowing land and putting people and intermarrying, they're just going to disappear. They're not going to become their own nation, the nation of Israel that God's going to create. They're actually just going to become Canaanites. Just kind of meld into the culture around them. Before you know it, Abraham will just be somebody's distant relative, but he won't be his own nation, right? So the world, the culture here is trying not to let Abraham establish himself in the land. So look at verse 12. And Abraham bowed before the people of the land, but he spoke to Ephron so that the people of the land heard, saying, if you will only please listen to me, I will give the price of the field. Accept it from me, so that I may bury my dead there. Then Ephron answered Abraham, saying to him, my lord, listen to me. A plot of land worth 400 shekels of silver. What is that between me and you? So bury your dead. Abraham listened to Ephron, and Abraham weighed out for Ephron the silver which he had named in the presence of the sons of Heth, 400 shekels of silver currency acceptable to the merchant. Okay, so this is kind of the final portion of their negotiation. I want you to see this. Mentioning the price at all is a concession, right? What he's saying, it sounds to us in the way that the land, and it's designed to sound this way. Again, they're having a cordial interaction. They're having a respectful interaction. And so saying, what's 400 shekels between us? Listen, are Ephron and Abraham like close buddies? They probably never met, right? It's not like they're like cousins or something. So that phrase, don't take that at face value. It's not just him saying, it's 400 shekels of silver. It's not a big deal. Just take it. It's yours. What he's saying is, well, it's worth about 400, but please don't worry about the price. Now, even that is disingenuous in a sense, right? The only part of this that would have created a negative interaction would have been haggling, right? If he says, well, it's worth about 400, but that price, that shouldn't matter between us. That shouldn't matter when you're trying to bury your wife. That shouldn't be a big deal, that price. Now, we don't know if that price was super high or if that price was fair. But if Abraham comes back and goes, well, I'll give you 300. Now it's no longer a cordial conversation. They're not interacting. In this moment, Ephron actually knows he has all the leverage, right? Because before all these witnesses, he's offered it for free. So if you're not going to take it for free, well, it's worth about 400. That shouldn't stop you from burying your wife, 400, right? The entire mention of the price is basically putting the sticker on it. He's saying, well, it's worth 400. And so what happens is Abraham, instead of haggling, instead of having kind of a discussion with him that would have made it a negative thing, would have made Abraham look bad, he just doles it out immediately. He's like, okay, let me count that out in front of everybody, right? He counts the full price and he pays the full price. Listen, if you go to a car lot and you're buying a car, don't buy it for the sticker price, right? You lost, right? That's not, if the salesman comes out and he's like, well, this car is only this much, but you're the one that needs to get to work. Like, he knows he's got the leverage, right? And so in this moment, Abraham doesn't argue over the sticker price. He immediately begins counting out the money, and he does it before witnesses. Now, I want to go back a second. There's this previous incident where Abraham rescues a bunch of people, and one of the kings comes out and he says, Abraham, I'm going to give you so much. I'm going to give you so many rewards. You take whatever you want out of the plunder. Keep whatever you want. You deserve it. You did a great job. And Abraham says, no, I'm going to give this all back to you. I'm only going to take the food that I need to feed the men that came with me, but I'm not even allowed to take so much as a shoelace from you. He says, I can't take even a shoelace because I can never allow anyone to say that you made me rich, that you were the one that blessed me, Because everyone has to know that the reason that I am blessed, the reason that I am successful, is because of the God I serve. Here's the thing. There is this really bad theology in America that is, if you believe enough, God will just give you money. He'll give you health. He'll give you cars. You'll have everything you've ever wanted. Life will be great. Listen, that is not what the Bible says. The Bible actually says that a rich man should be boasting in his humiliation because it shows that he's serving the one true God. Because if your life is just easy street, you may have bought in on the world. Right? And so even though the Bible doesn't say that, I want you to see this. God does want to bless us. But why? He wants to bless us so that when people look at our success and look at our blessings, they see who we serve. See, if your blessings point to you and your achievements, that may be the truth. It may be that you've gotten it, that you achieved it, that it's from your hands. But if you want to be blessed by God, if you want what God has to offer that is actually fulfilling because it's actually Him loving on you, that comes when He knows that the way that you're serving Him and following Him will point people back to Him. When people look at your success and they go, how are you doing so well? And you go, well, I certainly had nothing to do with it. I don't deserve anything that I have. As a matter of fact, it is only because I serve a loving and living God that I have these things. Abraham understood that. Abraham wouldn't even take a shoelace because it might have distracted from the fact that he served the one true God and the one true God loved him. So in this moment, he is determined to buy this land and not allow anyone to be able to say, well, the only reason Abraham has land here is because someone gave it to him. The only reason someone has land here is because Abraham has land here is because someone was generous. Someone felt sorry for him because his wife died. No, he buys it full price, fair and square. He owns it. The deed is given to him. It's all settled. He does it before witnesses. It's indisputable because he is not going to allow anyone to steal God's glory. And I want you to see this. He pays by using a currency that's acceptable. Again, go back to the creation account. What happens? God creates a place for us. He creates a place where He can be with us, a land. And He says, this is my special place. I've cultivated it just for you. It's the perfect environment for you to flourish and be with me. And then when that's lost, it must be bought back. But it has to be bought back with acceptable currency. What is the currency that buys back our ability to live in the land with God? It's blood. And it's not just any blood. It's the only acceptable blood. It is the blood of the Lamb. It is the blood of Jesus Christ, the pure blood. See, here's the thing. If you go before God with your blood, you don't have enough to pay, and you don't have an acceptable currency. You have nothing to offer. Your blood, by the way. I mean, really, what do you have that's more valuable than you just being alive? And what I'm telling you is that you don't have anything more valuable than you being alive, and your very life isn't valuable enough to pay God. It is only Jesus Christ's blood, His life, that is an acceptable currency, that is valuable enough to have purchased the land back. He has purchased the ability for us to be right with God, to live in a space with Him. And that payment, it results in ownership. Have you ever gone on a vacation to somewhere that you were really excited about? You had a great time. I don't know what that is for you, but you were like, man, I went to this theme park, or I went to go see. Family probably is not that exciting. But the point is, you went somewhere and you were like, man, I'm so glad to be here. But what is the problem with that trip ultimately? You have to stay in a hotel. You have to stay in somebody else's guest bedroom. And that's fun for a couple of nights because you walk into the hotel room and you're like, look at this, mini soaps. And it's this big thing, right? But after 3, 4, 5 days of sleeping in somebody else's bed or in a hotel room, what happens? You're like, I can't wait to get home. Like, I've had enough fun. I can't wait to sleep in my own bed, have my own bathroom, and just be in my space. See, because living out of a suitcase gets old. I want you to see this. Abraham has been living out of a suitcase for his entire life. He has been traveling. He has not had a place that he could say, this is my home. This is where I'm supposed to be. Look at verse 17. So Ephron's field, which was Machpelah, which faced Mamre, the field and the cave which was in it, and all the trees that were in the field, that were within all the confines of its borders, were deeded over to Abraham as a possession in the presence of the sons of Heth, before all who entered the gate of his city. After this, Abraham buried his wife Sarah in the cave of the field of Machpelah, facing Mamre, that is Hebron, in the land of Canaan. So the field and the cave that was in it were deeded over to Abraham for a burial site by the sons of Heth. Okay. Think about the original audience right now. Think about who Genesis is being written to in this moment. Okay? It's being written to the Israelites who are wandering around in the desert, and they are on their way to fight a war over what is essentially a land dispute. They're on their way to the promised land where they know they're going to have to conquer the residents of the land. What is the claim even today? Even today, the claim is, who was there first? Were the Palestinians there first? Were the Jews there first? Whose land is it? Who owns it? It turns out that Genesis chapter 23 is a full description of land rights and ownership. It's a contract. The chapter is one of the earliest moments that there's a description of the fact that Abraham, the father of Israel, rightfully owns land in an indisputable way. He paid full price. He did it before witnesses. We knew where the borders were. We knew what the description of the plot of land was. Everything about it. This is a real estate deal. And it's kept in a way that made it to where no one could dispute it. No one could say, well, who saw it? Who was there to witness the contract going through? No, they have all the information, and what they're saying is, we have a property claim here. We have a right to the land. We are owners in the land. As a matter of fact, if the Israelites hadn't spent generations in slavery in Egypt, what do you think would have happened if Abraham had settled down on this plot of land? They would have bought more land. They would have spread out. They would have had a presence in the land that they don't have because they've been away. They grew into a full nation in some other land that enslaved them, but they're on their way back. And the argument that's made all the way from literally Old Testament biblical times to today is, you don't have any right to be here. You weren't here before. And by the way, the residents of the land today are not the residents of the land during Abraham's time. They're gone. So in this moment, Abraham has proof. One of the oldest, most dependable books in all of human history. We have the contract written out where Abraham can say, I owned land here. I'm a property owner. I'm a home owner. See, the point of this text is that the Israelites have a right to the land. They've been given it. They've purchased a piece of it. And this is just in the temporal way in front of a temporal people. Their argument is that the buying of the land was the beginning of the fulfillment of what God had promised Abraham in a much bigger way. It's the same with Isaac. Abraham's told, you'll have descendants that outnumber the stars in the sky and the sand on the seashore. Well, what does he have right now? He has Isaac. He has one. Well, Abraham saw the beginning of these promises and understood, there it is. God's going to make it happen. So the Israelites now, who number in the probably 2 million at this point, as they're marching back towards the promised land, are seeing hey, God promised something. He started it all these years ago with your father Abraham, and He's about to make it real. He's about to finish it. It's about to be the next step. You're going to own the land, and you're going to outnumber everybody, and you're going to be there. God's going to bring it into completion. And what do we know? Even that was a partial completion of the real promise. See, because the people of Abraham are not people who are just Israelites. This is the argument Paul's going to make in Romans. He says, it's the people who believe by the faith that Abraham had in the thing that Abraham believed in. That's us. See, the people of God are more numerous than the stars in the sky and the sand on the seashore. And someday we're going to own the land, the real land, the perfect land. See, the land is just a description. It's an analogy. It's something that's designed to stoke in your mind this idea of living in perfect connection with God, the way it was always meant to be. In this moment, we see in one of the earliest chapters in the Bible, God making the promises real to Abraham that He's going to complete in Jesus Christ, that He's going to give to every believer forever. That is what's happening in Genesis chapter 23. Where is our home? See, this is the question I want you to think about when you look at chapter 23, is where is your home? The reason that believers, I used to not understand this, like we're told in the Bible to long for Jesus to return. And to a certain extent, I'm like, yeah, I mean, I want Jesus to come back because then we'd finally be in heaven, right? Like that it'd be over. But also like, I know that we all have that thought where we're like, well, but I kind of want to do some things first. Like I want to graduate college and I want to get this certain job and marry this certain person and have kids. I want to do these things that everyone else gets to do before that happens. But see, that's missing the point. See, what it takes for us to long for the return of Christ, for us to long for the land that God has truly promised us, is to understand that we're living out of a suitcase every single day we're here. This is temporary. It's uncomfortable. This is misery when compared. Listen, the worst day in heaven, if that's even a thing, I don't know what that would mean, is infinitely better than whatever the best day of your entire life here on earth is going to be. You will never be able to measure. You will look back on the greatest day you ever had here and say, I was miserable compared to living in the land with Jesus. Being here, this isn't life. This is like a decision time. This is a little delay on life. Life's what happens next. Real life, the real thing we get to experience, but it starts with understanding where your home is and who owns it. See, because Jesus paid His blood, bought back the right to have the land and to have you with Him on it, and then He said, hey, I'm going to go prepare it. I'm going to go build a place for you, and you're going to get to be with me. That is what we should be longing for. And as long as we keep our eyes on that, you know what that does for us? It keeps us from going into debt here to the world that's offering us fake versions of that. When the world says, I'll give you rest, I'll give you fame and fortune and health and power, I'll give you money, entertainment, joy, all the things that the world has to offer that the things the world thinks they're offering, but they don't actually have them. They can't offer you what they don't have. They don't have access to any of these things in a real way, in an eternal way. They're offering you something fake, and all it does is put you in its debt. And my question for you is, when you live your life, are you living your life in a way that says, this isn't my home? I'm not taking anything from these people, from this place, because I'm just visiting. I'm a resident alien, passing through. That's why God tells us to pray for our daily bread. Just to pray, we're just living on the suitcase. Lord, what do I need today? What do I need today to keep going? Because my home is not here. This isn't where I'm settling down. This isn't where I'm putting my roots in. And Lord, I want to be with you in the land. Learn to live out of your suitcase in this life so that someday you can actually live in the land. put down roots, be somewhere with God in a permanent way. Ask yourself, who owns the land? It's not the world. It is Jesus Christ. And if you want what the world has to offer, they're offering you something that they don't actually have the right to. Even if they're holding the deed right now, that's going to
Hey guys, this is Philip Jackson, pastor to young adults at Evergreen Baptist Church. I want to invite you to come to Reach. We meet every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. at Evergreen Church in South Tulsa, just east of Mingo on 111th Street. The mission of Reach Tulsa is to cultivate a young adult community that's defined by real transformation and the sincere pursuit of a godly life through training in biblical disciplines, personal development, and intentionally transitioning into independence as mature members of the body of Christ. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to like and subscribe to our content. We're available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and wherever you find your favorite podcasts. Reach Young Adult Ministry is a part of Evergreen Baptist Church in Tulsa, Oklahoma. For more information and additional lessons, please visit our website, evergreenbc.org.